Seems to be recording. All right. So where were we? We were Christmas, weren't we? Backing up subdirectories. So this is an option. I don't think it's enabled by default. But if you're a person that installs or saves your show files, your XML files, in a folder under your show folder, so not in your show folder, but in a subdirectory under your show folder, the default backup mode actually doesn't back those up. So now we've added the backup subfolders option, and what that will do is it will walk all of the subfolders under your show folder and make sure that it backs up all the XML files there. It will do every folder except the backup folder, because backing up backups doesn't make a lot of sense. It becomes a bit of a, a multiplying problem. But that will guarantee that you get backup. So you should turn that on if you are saving your stuff in different folders. Okay, that one has no impact. There's xSchedule. We'll come back to that next week maybe. DMX selection model. So this was just a simple change that Gil made to make it easier to select the DMX effect. It used to be really hard to select DMX effects, and he's made that a lot easier. Where am I? There it is. Add a sequence option, blending. Oh, okay. So so now we come to a couple of big ones. So first of all is groups in groups. So you can now create a hierarchy of groups. So here we have the all group. It contains the DMX group and it contains the pixels group. And then within those, you can see the models that sit in those underlying groups. Not only that, but Dan has also, again, let's delete everything. Do I have, oh, where's my models? Okay, so he's also added some additional modes. So here's our all with, and this is with the butterfly applied across the whole thing. So per model, so he's added a whole bunch of additional models here. So this is, ooh, that's not good. I'll have to look at that one. We're now starting to get into new features. They're less likely to be stable. All right. So yeah, Dan's added some additional render styles when you've got a group like this and you're applying things. I can't remember which ones he actually added. I'd have to go back and check the check-in. But there are some additional models that previously weren't available here, which you can play with. What you can also do is you can blend across groups. So here we've got a butterfly. The butterfly is on everything on the whole house. And let's say I want to put the fire effect on my matrix. Well, there's the fire effect on my matrix. Now, historically, what would have happened is that we would have just seen the fire and it would have blanked out the all behind the house. But now it doesn't. Now what it does is it allows the data to be blended across the two. And now I have to go in and say effect 1 to force it not to do the blending. And the reason that happens is obviously the matrix and this group have overlapping channels. And so whereas previously you could only blend across layers, now you can blend between models using all the same blending effects up here. The thing you've got to remember though is whereas layers were rendering from bottom to top, and therefore layer 1 was the top, and then, sorry, effect 1 was the top effect and effect 2 was the bottom effect when you were looking at how the blending was applied. Because models are rendered from top to bottom, effect 1 is the bottom effect and effect 2 is the one above it that happens to be rendering onto the same channels. So it's just one of those things that you're going to kind of have to get your head around because that's how it applies itself. Hopefully I explained that okay. By default, you'll probably find that model blending is not turned on. You may need to come up. Here it is. Here it is here on the sequence settings. So here, because I created a new sequence, by default it turns on allow blending between models. If you load one of your old sequences, this will by default be turned off. And because it's turned off, you won't get any of that blending across the models. If you want to introduce it, you obviously have to turn it on, and you can, but you need to be aware that it's then going to allow every model to blend. And so you'll have to go through your whole sequence and make sure that you're either happy with how that blending looks, or you'll have to go up here and play with the blending mode to get it back to how exactly you wanted it to look. And so, you know, in the spirit of not breaking existing people's sequences, Dan's made that optional and turned it off, just as Chris ended up making the pinwheel new render mode an option rather than the default, because although his render mode I think is much better, if someone had built a sequence based on the previous behavior and needed it to work that way, and in this case someone did, we had to go back and reintroduce the old way of working. All right, so that's blending effects between models and groups, and support for groups within groups. I've got to say, support for groups within groups, look, I think there are still a few bugs floating out there. I must admit I haven't really looked at how groups within groups work on the test tab. That may cause problems there as well. But yeah, it's a really cool feature. It's something we've been missing, and it's now there. Okay, we've talked about controlling which output IP address stuff goes from. Mapping extensions, if you're doing imports, I don't know, I'll pick one. You used to do a save mapping here, and it used to be that the file names had no extension. Now I've defined them with an xmap extension, which will make them easier to locate in your folder, because it will obviously filter down. If you still need to get to your old ones, you can select the all files, and you can still find your old mapping file. But I suggest you save it with the xmap extension, because it'll make it a lot easier to find those files when you're doing imports in the future. Vixen 2 and LOR import. So I made look, it's a small change on the import for both Vixen and LOR. So I'll do the LOR import, because I do have one of these floating around somewhere here, I thought. Okay, that'll do. So historically you had to go and manually add your models in. This is now more like the XLights import, where all your models are added by default, but they're now collapsed in a tree structure. And so when it comes time to do the import, you just expand the one that you're interested in, and you pick the channel that you want to map. You can map at any level. That all works. You can set the mapping color just like you always could to do the import. So look, it's only a small change, but it does save you adding everything. And as you move between models, you can expand things back up, whereas the previous one left them all fully expanded, and you would spend your entire life scrolling up and down trying to find things. I'm sure it wasn't quite as bad as the XLights one. The XLights one was absolutely awful. But I've made a similar change to both this one and the Vixen import. I did remove the checkbox for the CCR import here. I must admit I'm a little unsure about whether that was a good idea or not, and I'm really waiting for feedback from LOR users to tell me whether that made sense or not. But that's the way it is right now. It's one of those double negative dialog boxes. Okay, bunch of things for the scheduler, a bunch of bugs, more scheduler. We talked about the list of reference files when you export effects. We talked about VSA files. I just didn't have one that imported correctly. I'm not sure why. Yes. So the servo effect, which is this one here, is the effect that you actually use for your faces. So this is what you use for your Skulltronics, and it lets you control 16-bit values as opposed to 32-bit values, which the DMX effect controls. But like I said, I'll let Gil, he'll do much better justice to those videos than I ever will. And we looked at that. We looked, oh yes, the old scheduler's gone. Notice there is no scheduler up here anymore. There's no playlist menu item. It's all gone. Oh, video effect. Allow the video effect to automatically synchronize. Okay, so let's go and create a new sequence, but this time let's base it off a video file, which I have in here. Okay, there's one at the top. Done. Okay, so we've got an OLAF video, and if I want to come down and drop a video effect on my matrix, and let's imagine for the moment that I only want to show this much of the video from the song. You know, so I cut the video in and out according to what part of the song it is. Historically, what I would need to do is I need to come down here and I need to select the video file, and then I'd have to go and play with the start time and try and match it all up with the audio. But given that this is actually a video file itself, and this is a video file, now all I need to do is click this checkbox, and it will automatically line the video up with the video in the audio. And so it'll automatically synchronize, and you don't have to set any of these other settings to make that happen. Much easier if you want to cut in and out of the video when you're sequencing a song like that. Okay, we showed that one. Fix effect background, so they default to first color and gradient instead of black. What Gil means by that is that some of the effects like Galaxy and the like, notice how they fill in the color, which generally represents the color that the galaxy is going to be. Or it used to be that if you came in here and you put in a color curve, it would not display this correctly. It would just display black instead of the color, and so Gil's cleaned it up so that you get a proper display of the color. Okay, so here are the additional render styles that Dan added. So per model render buffer styles and model group render buffer styles. Oh, it's actually the render buffer styles. Yeah, that's right. So that's, we were talking about that a little while ago, right? So that's here where he's added these per model, per preview, and per model default, and per model single line, which are just slightly different ways in which they represent or create the buffer on which we then do the rendering of the effects. I must admit, I'm not entirely sure what the difference between each one is. We probably need to get a description into the manual, which I know the guys are busy working on. All right, last one, only a couple of enhancements. The last release was heavily focused on some bug fixes. And this one here was just a small change to the scheduler, and this one here was some Arduino code that I posted into the repository, and I posted a video on that last week. So pretty much that's all of the enhancements bar the FPP uploads and the Falcon uploads and the scheduler.